Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome. Thank you for joining us in this special section of KT2077 Kurakani conversation. KT2077 conversation is a virtual platform where we invite various active practitioners, professionals from arts, theater, literature, activism, and more to discuss about like different topics, issues related to their profession and background. So Sheelasha will be briefly introducing today our speakers and moderators.
Hello, everybody. We have today our lovely speakers, Subash Thebe, Mihaela Drăgan, and Nikau Hindin. Our artistic director, Cosmin Costinas, will be leading up and moderating it. I'd like to introduce our speaker briefly. So our title of the talk is Plural Futurisms and Common Future. Subash Thebe Limbu works with sound, film, music, performance, painting, and podcast. His current works are inspired by science, speculative fiction, and future scenarios of struggles, migration, climate change, and identity or Adivasi Futurism. And as he calls it, are recurring themes in his work. He splits his time between Kathmandu and London, and currently he's joining us from London. Um, our next speaker, Mihaela, is an actress, playwright, and activist based in Bucharest. Her performance focused on connection between theater, Roma identity, social justice, and Roma futurism. In 2014, she founded Guvlikim, I'm so sorry, theater company together with other Roma actresses. Nikau Hindin is contemporary Maori artist based in Gisborne. She is deeply engaged in preserving traditions and continuing the lost art of her indigenous ancestor in New Zealand and the wider diaspora. In order to revive the practice, Hindin has studied under guidance of native Hawaiian kapa or bark cloth makers. So I'd like to request to begin the session. I'd like to request Subash Thebe to have a short presentation and talk about his work and practice a little bit. You're in mute.
Subash, you are in mute.
Okay.
Nugen kerekle asewaro kaming Subash Thebe Limbu ka yaktung lazinuro akelle London wa. Thank you. Hello everyone. My name is Subash Thebe Limbu. I'm from Yaktung Nation, and at the moment I'm based in London. And I'm very happy to be here with you all. So basically, let's start with this slide straight away. So I'm going to speak about my work. I'm sharing most of my recent works. I'm not going to bore you guys with my older works. So yeah. So these days I'm doing my works mostly based on the futuristic kind of themes, and but the perspective from the indigenous community or indigeneity or indigenous identity. And the thing I want to start about is the concept of mothership. I mean, I want to talk about it because you might see this mothership in my works. So basically this mothership is based and inspired by ritualistic object in our Yaktung community. It's called Silam Sakma. You can see over here. and it's quite popular in our communities. Everybody knows about it, even our indigenous community. They use this in the logo, and it basically means, Silam Sakma basically means like blocking the path of the death. So it's kind of words of death and the evil spirits. I mean, it's not unique to our community. I mean, this kind of ritualistic objects has been observed in many indigenous community. Most closely, there's a object in Tibetan culture called Namkha, I suppose, so which is quite strikingly visually similar, but I think the meaning of it is quite different. But I'm not surprised. I mean, Tibetan culture, our culture in the Indian subcontinent, I mean, they're all kind of mixed and inspired by each other, I suppose. So I wanted a mothership, I mean, to imagine cosmic travel in the distant future, or that kind of stuff. So I wanted a mothership, but I'm not good in designing. I'm not a designer. I'm not an animator. So I wanted kind of simple kind of structure that I could create in Blender, an app, a 3D app. So this was the object that I chose, and as you can see in the slide, the main ritualistic object in here, and then the design I did on Blender, and I created a fictional space agency from the future, and there's an insignia as well in here at the bottom right corner. So that's about it. And the next slide, I'll just play this. It's just like 30 seconds video, short clip.
Kambele saka adang besi naya chingmengo lerumang tamsing lelamin tensumlu kedeng baningwa in chaktumang lachai yaktimsa kokiro. Nandong mugo nandong din muri ke kusin netong lo kasing yamma ahekile patanginima pangduklo.
So this piece is called Parallax, featuring Bhagat Subba. It was first shown in Serendipity Art Festival in Goa 2019, and the voice, the spoken words you just heard, is by Bhagat Subba, one of the most prominent artist, singer from our Yakthung indigenous community. He recorded his first music album, which happens to be the first music album of indigenous Yakthung language, and it was just after 90s People's Revolution, because before that, recording and redistributing those kind of indigenous music and literature was kind of prohibited. Bhagat Subba talks about how he was not allowed to record songs in his own mother tongue, I mean our Yakthung language. I mean before that time, even though he had passed the Radio Nepal voice test, I mean in those days you had to do voice test in Radio Nepal, but he was not allowed to do it. And the letters I've used in this animation is called the Sirizanga Script or Yakthung Script, and this is our Yakthung Script. It was kind of revived by a person called Sirizanga Thebe Limbu. I mean, he happens to be my great grandfather. Obviously, I'm a proud descendant of the man, and so this, and the backgrounds on the letterings, I mean, I have used Sagittarius A star, kind of the center of the animations from NASA, and the music, I mean, I arranged it. I think that's about it about this work. The next slide I'll just play. I'll play the end of the slide as well because they are both related. Okay, not this one. Okay, this slide, this short clip I just showed is from the ongoing docufiction project, Ningwasum. Ningwasum basically, roughly translates as memory in our Yaktung language. So it's a project that it's in early production stage, and I'm doing the animation bits at the moment, and later on when I go back to Kathmandu, we'll start doing some actual video shootings and stuffs. And so the docufiction is basically about a time traveler, an indigenous time traveler or astronaut from the future who comes to the present to search for his missing father, whose spaceship was last seen in the Himalayas. So she basically is trying to go to places where he was last seen and then try to figure out if he can find his father or not. I mean, that's the plot. And this is the time traveler. I mean, an illustration of the time traveler. There's this little another clip. So this slide also got, got to do with the same ongoing docufiction project. And apart from that, I do field recordings, sound recordings. This one is in Yalung Glacier in Kanchenjunga. I was recording the sound of the melting glaciers in that region. And I do record sounds apart from the futuristic, I mean, science fiction inspired kind of works. I'm very much interested in the struggles of migrants and refugees in foreign land. As an immigrant myself, I mean, in the Western society, and I hold these issues quite close to my heart. So I do sound recordings and field recordings of this protest and stuff. And lastly, yeah, I also make a podcast. I mean, it's not a kind of a mainstream kind of podcast. I mean, you know, usually 5 or 6 people tune into the podcast. Half of them are like my family members. And yeah, this podcast is also got to do with the future scenarios and how and speculation of the future. So it's in Nepali, it's in Nepalese language, and yeah, we deal with the indigeneity and science as well, and then the cities of the future. I mean, in context of Nepal. And I think that's about it. Yeah, I think we can talk about it, the works or anything later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Subash Thebe. If you stop this screen sharing more.
Okay.
Thank you for talking about your work, where time is not in a linear way, and where our ancestor knowledge can be sort of acknowledged to imagine our future, to connect this idea of futurism in a different way. I'd like to request Mihaela to talk about her work. Would you like to start with the video or the slides?
Yeah, can you run them for me, please? So, yeah. Hi, hello everyone. Thank you for your beautiful presentation before. Yeah. So I'm coming from a theater tradition. I'm an actress and a playwright. And I remember that 2 years ago when I was invited by Cosmin in Hong Kong for an art residency, there was a moment where after all these years where I've been producing a lot of theater shows about my Roma identity, about the discrimination that Roma people are experiencing in Europe, I felt about our past, about our unknown and unrecognized Roma past. I felt that there was a moment when I felt all this pressure, you know, as an artist to speak about the past, about the discriminatory present. So I was looking for the future, and I remember that I was very happy during this residency because. Being a month in Hong Kong and traveling in Manila and Taipei for collecting magical practices in order to develop my concept, my Roma futurism concept, and all the people that I met there enriched me with a lot of information. So let's start from the beginning. So. Yeah, this was my final presentation at Parasite in Hong Kong on Roma futurism, and everything starting. I remember I was very inspired in Hong Kong by the cursing ladies that you meet them in Hong Kong under a bridge, and they have beautiful shrines, and you can go there and curse your enemies, like in front of everyone. There is no shame to go to them. And I went to them to experience this process of healing two of my enemies. Like I remember that it was a difficult decision to choose only two, and I felt that it was a very healing process, you know, to get power on people on which usually we as non-white people, we don't have power. So I felt very inspired by this practice of cursing enemies. So I developed a healing practice on healing racist politicians, fascists, and so on. And basically, Roma futurism is like an art practice that combines magic, like ritual practice, magical practice, witchcraft practices with technologies. And I try to develop a kind of new language, like a techno-witchy language, where I mixed up the anti-racist discourse, the technological discourse with very poetical this speech of the spells and witchcraft. Yes, and this and actually there is an image from one of the performances that I had before, where I'm using a shoe, because like basically this was the ritual that I saw in Hong Kong and I tried after to develop. cursing the Inames with a soul show. It was very beautiful, and I found it very feministic at the same time. Yes, so basically, like, Roma Futurism was born in Hong Kong, where like beside the cursing ladies from Hong Kong, I also met other people that are interested in witchcraft and technology. And after traveling to Manila and to Taipei, where I met shaman and witches, it was super, super beautiful. And as I said, it enriched my practice a lot. And after I returned to Romania, where I got in touch with the Roma witches, I have to mention that one of the Roma kinds in tribes, yeah, I don't know if tribes is a good word, but one of the jobs that Roma people are doing is witchcraft. And this is a job that only the women are doing it. And coming back to Romania, I also got in touch with Roma witches, and we even organized a conference of Roma witches in Romania, where we tried to have this exchange between my artistic practice and their witchcraft practice, and how can we unite and combine together our practices. Because I was very interested if they want to borrow my anti-racist discourse from my performances. Meanwhile, they will allow me to also borrow their words, their witchcraft practices. So yeah, and all the last year I've been traveling in many cities in Europe, cursing politicians, and especially politicians who specifically manifested their hate against Roma people in Europe. And in this photo, you can see Salvini, Matteo Salvini from Italy, that is one of the biggest fascists in Europe. And this was in London, where again I went this time in a theater residency. And actually I wrote a play on Roma Futurism. Maybe afterwards I can show you the trailer and tell you more about it. Mm-hmm.
So would you,
I can, yeah, or I can, it was the other one. We can also see this, it's okay.
This is Viktor Orban from Hungary, who compared Roma people with animals and validated Roma Holocaust. And here we have Salvini from Italy, who plans to deport all the Roma people from Italy and sterilize Roma women. And here is Rareș Buglea, a Romanian politician who wants again to sterilize Roma women because they produce too many Roma children. So he's afraid that Roma will become a majority here in Romania. And here is Trump, with no connection with Roma people, but everyone hates him, so fuck it. May you become poor for the rest of your life. But our Trojan banker grants that we devour your money. The spirit of the internet grants that I break your neck, your arms, your legs, your dirty mouth. So may I not hear again your hate speech against us. Our cyber sisterhood grants that your loved ones are going to die, that you spend your sweet money for the coffin and pole, and you prepare a funeral feast. So may I get peace for myself and my people. Your flesh, piece by piece, your bones for one by one, may you suffocate in your own civilized blood. May you be infected by by 1,000 computer viruses, may remain forever in a non-technological darkness, in the black hole of computing crashing. We will stop your malefic plans against us and disrupt your racist and your fascist actions against us. May you be abandoned in deserts where the electrified dust of cybernetic chaos coils in direction of random destination in devastating electromagnetic storms against you.
Let us multiply to Let us multiply through our
techno-witchcraft, our cyber sisterhood, and our resistance.
Okay, just a second. For the other video.
Okay.
You can.
Yes. So yeah, this was a video recording that I made it because yeah, I mean it's not a video art for galleries or something. It was I'm collaborating a lot with the technology center in Bucharest, and during the work of my theater play Roma Scene, The Age of the Witch, I've been collaborating with them, and we try to develop the technological aesthetic on the play. And can we see now the trailer, or should I?
Yeah.
Need to speak. No. Oh.
Just a second.
Yes. Meanwhile, I can continue to speak about the play. So, yes. So actually, it's coming from these theater traditions. Like last year in London, during a playwriting residency, I wrote this theater play about future witches, cyber witches from the futures who are fighting the neo-fascist politics from Europe and control the technology, and are coming with concrete proposal on our climate crisis, for example, or you tell me when I have to stop. Okay.
Shall I play?
Yes, sure. Okay. Yes. So yeah, this is the trailer of the play that I wrote, and because like many people after after I talk to them about Roma Futurism and how the witchcraft practices are combined with technologies and media work, they asked me about how you do this, and I told them, like, for me always technology look like magic, and I think there are more connections between them. Everything's fine. Hello.
Yes, I think it's, yeah, I think it should be fine. Please go on. Yes.
Okay. Yes, so this was a play about the future. I remember, like, during my residence in London the last year, I had a lot of research on technologies, trying to come with concrete proposal how for example we can hack the neo-fascist parties, how we can hack Brexit, how we can defeat our planet, and coming with concrete proposal on the climate crisis. So yeah, Roma Futurism is using a lot of magical realism and fantasy and Roma subjectivity, and I really hope that it will become an art movement, and other Roma artists will take it and try to develop it in their own way. Should I stop or should I continue? Because I don't know how long time do I have.
I mean, if there's you would like to share, you can certainly share a little bit. I mean, and yes, sure.
So I can continue to speak. Can I continue to speak? Okay. And can we see again the slides, Sheelasha, so I can talk a little bit more about?
Okay.
Yes.
Just a second. And
yeah. And again, when I try to develop this concept, a very important thing that I took into consideration was that Roma Futurism has to be an approach that ironically addresses the need of integrating Roma people in Europe and align them to the present, as we are seen as primitive or traditional, and our art folkloric. And for me, it was very important to address this issue with irony, because it's not the one who should be integrated in Europe. And this is the only discourse that I hear around me from politicians, from society. But because we always integrated, we always knew how to adapt when in all our oppressive history and this present, but is the Gaje, the non-Roma people, the white people, who should learn anti-racism. So yeah, for me it was very important, like, working on the concept to be ironic and to tell to the people that actually we always have been futuring, and we are still futuring, and we were the ones who invented the handcrafts. We were blacksmiths and curators, and Roma people were always the ones who brought technologies in the villages and cities. And actually our role in connection with technology is more important than the people are thinking, because, like, yeah, it's an issue that many Roma people, because of poverty, they don't have access to technology, or they don't have a phone or computer and so on. And I always thought, like, we will have been the ones who have invented and developed technology if the Gaje, if the white people will not have left us in precarity. So this is a starting point somehow from me. to see technology as a Roma craft, and the craft that it belongs to us, and we have to take it back and work on it and use it on our favor, and use technology on developing like leftist politics for us, and technology helping us to find a place for us when we are always rejected, and the neo-fascist politicians always are talking about our deportation. Yes, and these are some images from Roma scene, the age of the show. In Roma Futurism, all this cycle of oppression, of Roma oppression, it gets to an end. And we are entering this place, this space, Roma scene, that is destined to eliminate, to end the capitalocene, the end of capitalism. And Roma scene is a space where finally we can feel safe as Roma people in this world, where we practice our techno witchcraft, and we are in control of our own destiny. Yes. And I have to say that now I'm, after I've been working a lot on cursing practices, and now I'm working on healing and on Roma healing, on healing the transgenerational trauma of Roma people. And now I try to develop a new language, of a techno-witchy language, where we can find common practices on healing ourselves and our slavery, Holocaust trauma, and finally we can find our peace, and us as Roma artists to find a space where we don't feel pressure to always talk about this past, and this past is not everything that defines us. And I know that also for other Roma artists is a lot of pressure to constantly speak about on all this unknown history, and about who are Roma people, what about us in Europe, what is our history here. And I think we have to go forward, and Roma Futurism is here to try to find new practices where us as Roma artists feel creative, and we can express our art without this community pressure to talk about all these topics that nobody knows, nobody wants to know. And I really hope, as I said, that it will become a movement and will be taken forward by other Roma artists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and we really hope this will become a movement all around the world, and a moment of solidarity and healing. Thank you. Now I'd like to request Nikau to talk about your work and how you have been instrumental in reviving topical practice.
Kia ora. I can't seem to start my video.
Okay, I can do it. Would you like me to do it?
Yeah, I can't start my video.
Okay, just a second. So I'm starting with the slides.
Oh, here we are. I've got the slides. I can do the slides.
So would you like to start with the slide? Okay.
Yes, sure. Kia ora, everybody. Firstly, thank you for the beautiful talks. That was very insightful, and I love this kōrero, or talk about the future, and we have a saying in our culture that is, we walk back into the future. And so a lot of my practices are based on revitalizing traditional practices that we have practiced for a really long time that relate to the environment. So firstly, ko Nikau tōku ingoa, he uri ahau no te hokianga whakapau karakia ko Ngāpuhi ko Te Rarawa o Kuiwi. My name is Nikau Hindin. I am from a tribe called Ngāpuhi and Te Rarawa, which are in the far north of the North Island of New Zealand. So we have 2 islands, and I'm from the top of the North Island. And I come from an ancestress Ngahuia. And I'm a bark cloth maker. So I beat the bark of the ote plant, which is the paper mulberry, into cloth, and I paint using natural pigments. And I learned about this practice in Hawaii. So in 2013, I first went to Hawaii to learn about, well, to study there, but being in Hawaii, I came in close proximity to the waka hokulea, which you can see pictured there, which is a double-hulled voyaging canoe. And she was built in 1975, and at that time there was a theory that Polynesians, or our ancestors, just drifted and found land accidentally. So we, have stories of our ancestors navigating and finding land and setting out on intentional voyages to find land. And Hokulea was the first double-hull voyaging canoe that was built to kind of debunk this theory. And so she was built in 75. She was dreamed up by the artist Herb Kane, and then they searched Polynesia for a navigator, and they found Maupialu in Satawal in Micronesia. And he taught a new generation of navigators. And so Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, which is what we like to call the Pacific, covers a third of the world's surface area. So it's a huge expanse of ocean. And the fact that our ancestors were able to navigate and find these tiny little islands in this big mass of ocean is, and hundreds of years ago, is the equivalent in terms of technology to a man landing on the moon. That's how advanced the technology was at that time. And so that's being around this the waka, this waka hokulea, and for many who have spent time in the presence of this waka, in the presence of the crew, she really changed something and made me realize, she's the physical embodiment of the amazing feats of our ancestors, and this is a living symbol that brought everybody together and allowed us to, educate communities and be proud of who we are as Indigenous peoples and thrive as a community. And so, inspired by that, by Hokulea, I started working with Aute because Hokulea, that was a massive revitalization of navigating and voyaging, which was almost lost. And when I found out that Aute, that Māori once made this cloth using bark from the Aute plant, even though there weren't any examples of it, and there was very little research and no one knew how to do it in Aotearoa, I knew that I could explore this practice because of Hokulea. And this work on the left here is actually, this piece here is called Ngā Hoku, and it's actually her sail, the sail of this waka during her 1999 voyage to Rapa Nui. And so the sail was, and the lines and the marks on it was really my first time that I was learning about navigation, learning about the sun's movement from north to south during the summer and winter solstice. It was about connecting Hawaii, Aotearoa and Rapa Nui together in this great expanse of ocean. It was about learning that the ocean was something that connected us. It wasn't something that separated us. And it was learning about the star compass, which is the conceptual framework that Māori and that we use to navigate this great expanse of ocean. So this was kind of my first star map. Yeah, I wonder, oh, there we go. Okay, so this is me in 2017 in Maui, in the island of Maui, learning from my teacher, Ka Liko Spencer. This process of beating bark cloth, and so what I've done is I've cut the plant, I've cut the tree down, and I've peeled off the bark, and I'm scraping off the brown outer bark so that I can end up with this nice white kind of, well, it's not white, but it's like brown, or light brown sappy material that I then scrape and clean and then beat using these beaters and on these wooden anvils. And so I was really lucky to learn from Ka Liko Spencer. She's one of the few and one of the first Native Hawaiian women practitioners who have actually written, so entered into the academic space and written about this practice. Previous to her, it had only been observers and mostly men who never did this, who never physically did the practice. So she was adding so much value to the practice. And so in Hawaii, they have a strong practice, but they're still, revitalizing it in their own way and teaching others. And yeah, so I came back from Hawaii and I started practicing using Aute and using my knowledge about celestial navigation. I started to make these star maps and just to talk about voyaging and celestial navigation in my practice. And this was a show that my recent show in Wellington at the Dowse Art Museum. This is my first solo in a long time. Okay, so I'll just explain about the star compass. So if you can all imagine sitting, you're on your waka, you're on your boat or your canoe, and you're in the middle of the ocean and you can't see any land, and it's a clear day, so the horizon is crisp, and so all you can see around you 360 degrees is this line, which is the horizon. And so that line, our ancestors divided the horizon into 32 houses, and included in those houses is the house of north, the house of south, the house of east, and the house of west. And then between those houses we have quadrants, and there's 7 houses in each quadrant. And then stars, we say, rise out of these quadrants. They rise on the eastern horizon and they set on the western horizon. And so we know that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and we can learn about the sun's arc, and that can help us tell direction. Well, at nighttime, when there isn't the sun, you use the stars to find direction. So you memorize which star rises in which star house. So for example, Matariki or Pleiades. Pleiades rises 24 degrees north of east in the house called Kainga. And so if you see Matariki on the horizon, then you have a marker for direction. You know that, oh yeah, Matariki is there. That means that 2 houses that way is east. And when you know where east is, you know where west is, and then you know where north and south is. And so you can put your canoe in the direction that you're wanting to go. And so, so for me, this is in my star maps that I create, this is the horizon, this line, and these triangles, or I call them niho, these represent the star houses, and the lines going up, those are the different stars that my ancestors used to navigate. And so, for example, this one here, I'm not sure if you can see that hopefully you can see my mouse. That's Tautoru, which is Orion's belt. Then next to the Tautoru is Puangahori. I don't actually know all the English now. I think that's Procyon in English. Then we have Putara, we have Potu Te Rangi, we have Te Kakau, we have Taumata Kuku, then we have Hokulea, Matariki, we have Gemini, Castor and Pollux, and then we have Whanui. And so I used this method to memorize the stars and help me memorize the names of the stars. And then once I got familiar with the names of the stars and where they are in the sky, then I started to learn about what stars rise at different times. And so like what stars rise during the different times of the year. And so for Māori, we have then I started getting into time and this concept of decolonizing time, because we're ruled by the Gregorian calendar, which is actually a solar calendar, but our ancestors used a moon calendar and a star calendar, which is the stellar lunar calendar. And so this series that I did here, you can see I've got it's got 7 star maps, and they were done on the moon before new moon. And that recorded the times that the stars rise and set during that night of that moon we call Mutu Whenua, right before new moon. And the new moon for some tribes is the first of that moon cycle. And so this process that I was doing was about decolonizing time and about trying to learn about the symbols that we've become really disconnected to because of the Gregorian calendar, because we're not connected to the environment. So this was about learning the different signs that used to cue us for the correct thing to do during that moon cycle, or what time was a good time to plant, and what was a good time to go fishing, and what was a good time to, what were the productive times of the months. And so we used the stars and we used the moon calendar to instruct our daily lives and our year cycle. And so this series was, after learning about navigation, I started to become, I haven't been sailing, so I've been more grounded on land, and I've been grounded in, and especially during lockdown, we were bound to our house, we couldn't go anywhere. And so it was actually a really positive time for us to stay in one place and learn about the different signs of the environment, and learn about the wind, and that's, I'm very fortunate to live very close to nature. I live very close to the ocean, so I'm privileged enough to experience the changes in the environment and observe them. And here's the close-up. So with the oath there, yes, I've revitalized or relearned this practice, but I'm one of many bark cloth makers in the Pacific, in Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, and we all have different methods, and I kind of combine the revitalization of voyaging and the revitalization of bark cloth together, and I hope that they kind of complement each other. This work, the other, with the star maps, I can choose a specific day to record the rising and setting of the stars. And so this star map was recorded the day that Te Tiriti o Waitangi was signed, and Te Tiriti o Waitangi is the binding contract that Māori, that the Indigenous people of New Zealand made with the Crown, made with the Queen, and made with settlers, and we call it the first immigration document that legally allowed the migration of white people to Aotearoa. And this Te Tiriti is something that we still we want it to be upheld, and we want the promises of this document to be met by the current government, because it proposes that Māori and the settler colonial Crown will work in partnership together, and that is a future that Māori, that we strive for. And so choosing this date is a political act. It's a reminder that ultimately we will always be fighting for and striving for the promises of the treaty to be upheld and honoured by the government and by people of Aotearoa. And I just wanted to put this work in because obviously, as an Indigenous person in Aotearoa, we upon the knowledge that we are all connected, the Black Lives Matter movement affects all of us, and this was a work that I made in response to the Black Lives Matter movement, and I used the proceeds of it to go towards the movement and anti-racist organizations here in Aotearoa. And finally, this is the plant, and this is the plant Aute. And so part of my ongoing desire is to establish firstly the plants in Aotearoa, and then to teach a new generation of bark cloth makers here. And this is a picture of this happening, and one of my first really successful wānanga using our native Aute, and I guess for us, what does success look like? You're only successful as what you've passed on to the next generation. So sharing your knowledge is really important, and that is what my practice is really tied up in. It's about teaching and sharing and building relationships, and that's what's really important to me.
Would you also like to share the video, or it's fine?
We probably don't need to see it. It's quite, yeah, it's all good.
Cosmin.
Hi. Thank you, all of you, for these really wonderful presentations. We're excited and honored to be able to feature them in the next edition of the Triennale that Sheelasha ji and Hitman ji and the whole team are working together to to present it, and not only to feature them, but to have them as important thinking points and starting points for different conversations that we would like to stage in the exhibition and in the whole program around the Triennale. I would like to pose a couple of questions to each one of you before we also open to the online audience, because there's a few, and these are questions that are, I think, quite relevant to the practice of each one of you, and they're also questions that we are thinking through while working on the Triennale. So the first one would be, as also quite apparent in each of your practices, indigenous futurisms have strategically relied on the past, on hijacking a certain idea of tradition in order to reclaim a future, and also to fight in the present, of course. But at the same time, the past was also used, the past of each of the communities that we're talking about was also used in a horizon of exotization and in a racist discourse of denying historicity to all these communities, by claiming that the past is somehow never ending and that all these communities don't have history because they're fixed in the past. So I'm curious to pose this question to each one of you of what is your strategy to reclaim the past, to reclaim it both from these discourses of exotization, but also to reclaim it as a tool for claiming this future that we're that we were discussing. And of course, that's, yeah, and so Subash, would you like to start?
Oh, sure. The strategy, I think the strategy can be done in various ways. One of the things I'm trying to explore is how we can manipulate the technology we have at the moment, and how this how this indigenous knowledge, how our identity, and how the collective experience, not just from the Indian subcontinent, but from around the world, from North America, or New Zealand, Australia. This is kind of something new, it wasn't kind of this new experience because of social media and the technology. We are this meeting itself is kind of proof of it. I think we are kind of getting to know each other's experiences, each other's history, and trying to navigate how we can move along in these future timelines, trying to navigate how we can make our struggles more efficient in the future. I think we can learn a lot about from each other, and that would be one of the things we can do. And the other thing would be trying to I like the concept, the idea of image, how can image kind of impact the psyche of the society? How is one single image, say for instance, the recent say in popular culture, the image of Chadwick Boseman as King T'Challa in Black Panther. that one image of him, I mean, how it can impact the psyche of a young black kid, or say the image of an indigenous writer in my community, from my community, speaking in various platforms, how that image of a writer or a musician or a director has impact on the psyche of young people or kids. I like the notion of the image it can have, and the way it can propagate certain discourses, and the way we can manipulate our kind of aspirations and the future strategy, and that image, that projecting that kind of image in the arts, or say music or literature, is a very, very important and very significant, I think. And on the other front, apart from that, that would be in art and literature or creative kind of thing. But other than that, the main strategy, I think, I mean, yeah, art does lays the foundation to shape our psyche or to shape our kind of thinking, but the main kind of thing has to happen on the streets. It has to happen in the community that we live. It has to happen in outside the governing bodies. I mean, outside the compounds of the governing bodies, outside the people, I mean, protesting on the streets. The main thing, it has to happen on the ground, I suppose. So I think we have to go from the creative side of the spectrum, and also not forgetting the actual changes will not be delivered, I mean, if we don't participate in active conversations or active kind of engagements. I think we have to use both strategies, I mean, both creative and on the streets, I would say. And the indigenous futurism, like you said, it could be a space that indigenous artists can imagine, a space where we have a sovereignty, where we have agency, where we have technology, where we have our culture, our traditions, our knowledge still intact, but with the science and technology alongside. And this kind of image, this kind of imagination will help us to realize, I mean, if not all, I mean, some of the imaginations in the future. I think, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Thank you for asking this, Cosmin, because like I always ask myself the same questions over and over again. How do we reclaim a future for us? Meanwhile, we actually have an unrecognized past, an unrecognized history. And I think this was an idea from where I started to develop things, because I also ask myself how the Roma people, how the Roma communities have developed themselves without all this oppressive history and past. And this was from where the narratives on Roma futurism have started, because like creating these characters. Sorry, I'm talking a lot about theater because I'm coming from theater tradition.
That's all right. Yeah.
I hope this is all right.
Yeah, I think it's certainly interesting for us to see how these conversations play out in different fields as well, and different.
Yes.
Yeah.
So by creating these characters, these cyber witches who are going back into the past, into specific moments of our history as Roma communities, and they trying to change this past in order to see what would have been our present, and from this we can see how our future can look like. So I can give you an example of in this theater play that I wrote, the Roma scene, the Age of the Witch. The cyber witches, the techno witches, they try to go back into the history of the Holocaust and try to fight the Nazi, to go back to the Auschwitz and save the Roma camp. The Roma camp was that was eliminated in 44 during only one night. And of course it's it's difficult to talk about the future without knowing history, our history. So I think in my practice, I always connect the future with the past, and trying, not forgetting all this past that nobody talks about it, but at the same time, like to imagine as in the future, and imagine as how would Roma communities, how would Roma person developed themselves without all this oppression. And and because again I am an actress, and many times being on stage I feel as a witch, and the words are my spells. Like I really believe that we have to imagine and to create art about the futures, because like Roma prevailing in the future, indigenous people, Black people prevailing in the future is a radical idea, and we have to talk about it and to induce it in the minds of the people, because we are here, we exist, we will not leave, and we deserve our place. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I support the what has been said before me. Firstly, Cosmin, I think we have to reject the discourse that was created by the colonial settler culture, and we have to reject, anthropology and all of that discourse that was, and all of the media and all of the literature that was created to oppress us and to it saw us in a specific way, and that created the racist discourse that we have to kind of fight through today. So first of all, we have to reject it, and in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we do reject it. And any time this idea that our culture is set in the past and it's unmoving and it's not going anywhere, we have a strong academics who come out and openly criticize these movies that position us in the past and position us as unmoving. So that's always the first thing, is to just reject these ideas. And then secondly, it's to criticize it whenever it comes up. And then to move forward, it's about reinforcing Indigenous knowledge systems and enforcing these Indigenous knowledge systems which are going to change the world. And it's the only way for us to get out of this climate crisis, is to use the knowledge systems that have allowed Indigenous peoples to cohabit, to live in harmony with the environment. And for example, in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we're having a big resurgence of the maramataka, which is something I work a lot in my practice, is our Māori lunar calendar, and that instructs our planting and our fishing and productivity. And the maramataka, the lunar calendar, is over 5,000 years old. It's the longest longitudinal study of the environment, and it's flexible and it's specific to every region and every community and every landscape. So it speaks to the land. And in Aotearoa, there's a big push to use it in our daily lives, and also to use it, and strategies to rehabilitate the environment. And as an artist, I am constantly talking to people about how our ancestors told the time, and how our ancestors, and how we need to decolonize our sense of time and work in a different system. And just by living it and reinforcing it within your community, you're creating a pathway forward, and not allowing the colonial settler government to keep you in the past and keep you disempowered. So yeah.
Can I just add?
Thank you. Please, yeah.
Please,
yes, yeah.
Nikau just talked about rejecting the idea of the colonial settler ideologies and things. I think I totally agree with her. And then the idea of this, we have a Yaktung, our indigenous professor, he talks about like delinking and then relinking our identity, our culture, and then, how to relink our identity in the future. And the idea of questioning what has been said in the history. Say, for instance, we are having a census in our country, Nepal. And then this very idea of religion, there is this box you have to tick, which religion you belong to, right? This very idea of religion is, I don't know, from the native and indigenous or Adivasi perspective, it's not it's not natural kind of thing. There's this professor called Dr. Balkrishna Mavuhang. He questions like, should we even state our religion? Because if you look back in the history, we were people who worship nature, rituals, singing and dancing, right? We didn't have this idea of like Christianity or Islam or Judaism, those kind of things. That kind of concept was new to us, say 200 or 300 years ago. This kind of rejecting or delinking kind of thing, yeah, I think it makes sense to this discourse, I guess.
Yeah, well, in the same direction of decolonizing the sense of time, as a, well, admittedly, gesture was also the action that we took with the Triennale to extract it from the Gregorian calendar and the system of counting the time, and to basically claim it into the counting system of the Nepali calendar, which also projects it into a plausible future when seen from the Gregorian calendar. So there is this duality in that gesture. Well, I have another question that I would like to run through all of you before we open to the public. I know there's a lot of other questions coming, and it's related. It's another issue that we are very busy with in thinking about the Triennale, and it's related here more with the second part of the title of today's conversation, and that's about the common future. And that's again trying to figure out how can we, on one hand, reclaim the integrity of each indigenous cosmologies, and how can we reclaim the specificity and particularity of each mode of imagining the world, whether it belongs to a whole indigenous community or, as Nikau beautifully put before, in some cases, being, rooted to very local realities of nature or of the land. So how can we do this on one hand, and also acknowledge that our sense of universality that we still commonly work with is also rooted in the European intellectual project that is inextricably linked with colonialism. So how can we create a different sense of commonality that is not rooted in this compromised sense of universality, but allows both the sense of plural cosmologies to thrive, and at the same time a commonality of destiny and solidarity across all of our communities.
Yeah.
So would you like to start now to switch the order?
Yeah. Oh, it's a great question. And it's interesting how you linked universality to Western ideologies, because but for us, because we're in Aotearoa and we're isolated, far away down here, but we feel so connected to our Native Hawaiian cousins, and we have really strong relationships with Native Hawaiians and with all of our Pacific Wānaka Kiwa relatives, and as I said before, we make up 1/3 of the world's surface area. So if we united together as an indigenous force, we might be the largest continent in the world. But and I think it's like that kind of thinking it's being, yes, really strong in our local community, really strong in our family units, and with that strength, if we're looking after our language, if we're looking after our cultural traditions, if we're looking after our bodies and our environment, then we can use that knowledge to help to help other Indigenous communities. And I know that for us, we had a kohanga reo historically. We've helped the Native Hawaiian language movement has grown in the same way that ours has. So we've helped each other in the revitalization of our language. And so that's how I would frame it, which is not quite answering your question, but for us, we have been collaborating with other Indigenous cultures for a long time, in Turtle Island, in Te Iwi Moia in Australia, and in the Pacific, and it's these relationships that we need to foster and grow, so that we can share Indigenous solutions for the climate crisis and things.
And thank you. Mihaela?
Yes.
So yeah, I'm thinking now, like a week ago, I was in Frankfurt in Germany, and I was invited on an event on Afrofuturism. And for the first time, like it happened this, and I felt very grateful that the person of color who organized all this event, they gave me the space for Roma futurism. And it was for the first time when I was in a space without any white artist. I have to say this. I've never experienced this before. So yeah, I felt so grateful to have this space and share, and them share this space with me and find a common space for our different futurisms. And this was my objective also in when I was in Hong Kong and in Taipei, in Manila. I found many common practices, similar practices that also the Roma witches in Romania, for example, are using it. And many times I tried to mix these practices in developing a new language or a new practice. I also try in Roma futurism to include other communities, and I want Roma futurism to be inclusive and always to include in conversation, yeah, indigenous people or Black people, and to mention them and how much I get inspired by their art and their art practices. So yeah, I definitely I'm looking for a common space or a common culture where we come together as community.
Right. I think the I think this movement is already happening. Like Mihaela said, the Afrofuturism, it kind of, as far as I understand, it kind of starts from Afrofuturism. I mean, it's a mother of the futurisms we are talking today, I suppose. And then indigenous futurism draws from Afrofuturism, and people are trying to, put or work on the futurisms in their own geographical context, and communities or nations, nationalities, say for instance in what we currently call Nepal or India, or those kind of nation states. I call that futurism as Adivasi because indigeneity is not a monolith, right? We have disagreements, or any community for that matter, or a Roma community, it's not a monolith, but there is something that unites us all, and which is the marginalization and discrimination that has been carried out by the settlers, colonialist, since the ages. And this common future, it's kind of happening in a way that these sort of discourses, like learning from each other experiences and each other's knowledge and each other kind of strategy, like how this community has tackled those kind of situations in that part of the world. Maybe we can learn from it, or maybe the idea of other ideas about, maybe it could be in any front. Say in my own community, I cannot imagine Adivasi futurism or indigenous futurism moving forward without acknowledging the struggles and the inputs of the Dalits and the Madhesi people of my community, of this region, who had suffered a lot from the Brahminical colonialist kind of system since ages. This kind of working together as fellow working together as an allies, working together as people who shared a similar kind of oppression and discrimination. It brings us together, and people are trying to reach out. I can see it happening in our country. I can see it happening in the global north, the global south. People are trying to reach out, and I think it's a project. It's a project that is that is happening now, and then this ongoing thing, I think, will lead to something more. Something. We can realize something more. Concrete kind of futures. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's time to open the floor or the microphone to more questions. So, Sheelasha ji, are we transferring all the questions from Facebook here?
That is the question. We have other comments, but we have question from Bikil.
So it's especially for Nikau.
Yes.
So,
I can read it. So yes, Nikau, the idea of decolonizing time is really fascinating. Is there any deeper meaning about decolonizing time in the Maori culture or rituals?
So Rangimata Mua is one of the leading academics in this space, and he wrote the book about Matariki, which is the time of the year where this constellation rises in the morning, and that signifies the Māori, the new year, and it's usually during winter, and it changes every year. But he says that if you want to colonize a people, you take away their sense of time and space. And the Gregorian calendar disconnected us from the environment, because we use the environment to tell time, and we use the moon and the tides and the flowering of different plants and the spawning of fish, and we used all of these symbols to place ourselves physically in time and space. And so this idea of decolonizing time for Māori is about reconnecting with the environment, reconnecting with the signs of the environment, and the knowledge system within the land that we were once experts in. And so it's about going back to your iwi, or like your tribe, and all just learning about the very specific nuances of your environment. And that comes through observing, and it comes through researching and listening to elders, and going back home and finding that knowledge. And so that's what decolonizing time, I think, is one of the most powerful, like conceptually powerful ways to decolonize ourselves and decolonize our thinking, is to be able to place ourselves in time and space.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, or do you and any of you have questions for each other outside of the ones that we posed?
I think we're out of time.
Or maybe just quickly. Now, Mihaela, you had a question? You seem to be grabbing the microphone.
Not yet, but actually, I know Subash. I met him last year, so we have been discussing a lot about our common practices. But definitely I want the contact of Nikau and with her.
Yeah, I really appreciate your guys talk about futurism, because that's not something that we talk about a lot. So it's really refreshing to hear, you articulate and place yourselves in that space. And I'm still trying to figure out how it relates to us and what we're doing. So it's like, yeah, really like ignited something in me, just hearing about your practices and the way that you like propel yourselves forward, which is super fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, yes, please.
Talking about futurism, I mean, there's this writer and Afrofuturist, Yatasha Womack. She talks like, we've been practicing, I mean, some of us might have been practicing this movement, I mean, this genre of art and literature, I mean, since quite some times, but may not have necessarily associated with it. I mean, Mihaela and me, we kind of, I mean, put ourselves in like, okay, yeah, this is what we are doing. But there might be other artists, I mean, who are not eager to associate with certain movement. I mean, for me, I mean, instance, I mean, not all of my works are related to indigenous futurism or Adivasi futurism. I mean, so I mean, I mean, it's understandable. Some indigenous artist or some Roma artist, I mean, they may not want to associate it with the futurism, I mean, we are talking about. But it's certainly a very significant kind of movement and discourse I see happening. I mean, especially coming from North America. The indigenous writers and creators, and I mean, I mean, it's been spreading all over the place, I suppose, and I mean, we cannot not, I mean, and all of this kind of goes to, I mean, we owe this thing to Afrofuturism. I mean, it's quite very humbling.
We do have one more question from Sunil Nathan Raisi. So the question is, indigenous community usually doesn't have any written evidence of their history. They are being passed on verbally through our generation, which seems to create conflicts with the community itself and hold us back to achieve the bigger goal. Any suggestion to get through this?
So, I mean, I think I can. I mean, history. I don't know what Sunil is specifically talking about. So history, as in sense of, history as in sense of. I think there are histories written actually, and I'm not talking about the cultural kind of history. I'm not talking about the mundum, as we call it, those kind of oral traditions or storytellings. I'm not talking about, but I think the actual history, I think they are being written, but not necessarily far back in times. I think the main thing is there are loads of, like I said earlier, I mean, indigeneity is not a monolith. I mean, we have disagreements, right? There are so many. I mean, there are indigenous politicians who are quite comfortable. I mean, they are quite close to the power structures, and they don't want to, I mean, kind of say or put any kind of inputs to the movement. I mean, I mean, if that's what they are comfortable with, fine with them. But the greater thing, the greater picture would be not about the disagreements we have, but the greater goal, the greater achievement, we can achieve in the future should be the focus, I think. Yeah, and it's just like and it's just like communicating, continuously, and not kind of rejecting or kind of just cancelling any ideas or beliefs, and conversation among us would be a nice thing to start with, I suppose.
This is a really, really interesting question, and in some ways I can relate to it, and in other ways I cannot. Some of our histories are written, a lot of our songs have been written, but when we had lockdown, what I found really interesting was the way that our community used technology to create this kind of space, this what we call a wānanga space, which is like a learning space. And so we had our experts, openly talking about tikanga and like cultural traditions and cultural protocols and all of this kind of, quite important cultural knowledge, and it was in this technology context, and that was really new and really interesting that COVID, all of a sudden we were able to access all of these elders and knowledge holders that were scattered all around the country, and we were able to see them all in one space, and I found that actually really valuable, was being able to access these knowledge holders during that time. And that was only happened because COVID forced us to create other ways to engage with each other. So sorry, that's not really a solution, a suggestion, but it was just an observation of what happened here. But if one thing for me is art, so my practice, I use symbols in my ote that contain knowledge, and so that's a way that I am kind of like binding knowledge to my work, and so that it can be read, but it's not written, but it can be read and you can learn from the work. And so that's another way of recording knowledge and story without writing it. So that's maybe like a suggestion.
Well, thank you very much to everyone. And if we are lucky with the COVID situation to relent, then we might actually meet together, all of us, in Kathmandu next year, which we are very much hoping to be able to. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you
to all the team who helped organize.
Also, I want to acknowledge today is an interesting day in Nepal because government of Nepal is sort of celebrating the Constitution Day, where the rest of the marginalized and indigenous communities are sort of celebrating or protesting this day as a Black Day.
Yeah.
Conversation today particularly it also holds a special sort of meaning in a way when we're talking about building the futures communities together. So thank you very much.
And your powerful, inspiring presentation, sharing your experience. So please keep follow us for further programs. So yeah, I think bye for today.
Yeah, and we'd also like to acknowledge Shakya and Jagdish Muktan for the coordination, technical moderation, and
whole Kathmandu Triennale team.
Yeah, the entire team, the chairperson, the curatorial team, the director, and we'll have another session after 3 weeks. So yeah, see you everybody. Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.